Story 1. Humans are how old? Glimpo was very pleased with himself. He had passed all the tests and had been selected for a delegation to meet with the first alien race that his had ever encountered. It had been generations since first contact, and discussions had been dragging out. Glimpo's greatest wish was to finally close the negotiations his forefathers had started. Entering the room where the meeting was meant to take place, he pressed the keypad by the door to announce his arrival. "I remember when we had to knock," an older member of the delegation grumbled. First contact and the initial stages of discussions had been done planetside. This was the first to be done on a human ship fitted to accommodate their race. "To think these slow beings took 8 clocks to alter a vessel?" the old member continued to grumble. "All due respect, sir, their machinery may be more complex than ours." It was the case that the few pieces of technology that had been gifted had been reverse engineered. They weren't any marvels of function, but they were beyond complex by their race's standards from the reports Glimpo had read. "Ah, welcome delegates," a human said, standing up as the group entered the room. The delegates felt their breath freeze in their throats. They had only seen hollow images of the race identified as humans. "I see the halls were not to impress power upon visitors," the old member of the group whispered. Looking up at the human who stood a good twice their height, they had naturally assumed the race they were meeting was the same height as them, a failure the data team would no doubt be reprimanded for. "I hope we can finish these negotiations today. It has been a little while since we started, and the people back home are eager to start trade." "Yes," the old member barked. "We would have finished these discussions blocks ago had you not delayed so much. I apologize for the delays. It took us a little while to retrofit parts of the ship to suit your people better. I was but a newborn pup when you landed, and now I can finally see my race upon the greater stage of the universe. Indeed, we have prepared all the documents you requested." With a flick of his finger on a data slate he was holding, the group felt a buzz from their devices. Appearing on the screen were all the agreed-upon provisions. "Finally! It is good to be here," Glimpo grinned as he read over the document before spotting something. "Apologies, human, but what are these numbers here?" "Numbers?" the human repeated, arching a brow. "Oh, those are the date." "Ah, I thank you." "The date?" the old delegate barked. "The progression seems off. Do you measure time differently from us?" "It never came up, but it is likely as we are from different worlds." "I see. I suppose that does make sense." The old member marked the document with a digital stamp to indicate his agreement, as did the others in the group. "Perfect. With that, we can now proceed with a celebration." Walking over to a wall, the human pressed a wall-mounted device, and machines immediately began bringing out plates with cuisine from their homeworld. As the other members of the delegation helped themselves to the food and drink, Glimpo couldn't help but gaze out the window, looking down at the crimson orb that was his homeworld, a view afforded to so very few, but would soon become commonplace. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" the human diplomat said, walking up to stand beside Glimpo. "Yes, it is amazing. I still remember when we first arrived here. It was a sight to behold, seeing all the cities light up the world at night." "You mean your ancestors?" "Oh no, I was part of the crew when we first surveyed this world." "But that was close to 100 blocks ago?" Glimpo's outburst had paused the celebrations, as all his fellows now looked at him with shock for his outburst. Something no diplomat worth his fur should do. "I must apologize for my outburst." "No need." One moment the AI is still deciphering "plocks." It seems to be a new word the auto-translator units we are using hasn't identified. The human looked at his data slate as the AI worked out the meaning. But to Glimpo, it was odd. A plock was a plock. Every newborn cub learnt its meaning by the end of their very first. "Ah!" the human exclaimed excitedly. "I see the meaning now." "Glimpo, was it?" Glimpo nodded. "A plock is what my race calls a month." "Month?" Glimpo echoed as he realized the humans had another word for their unit of time. "So your race arrived here some 100 months ago?" The human nodded. "Yes, we had to take things slowly so as not to cause chaos. We slowly contacted your governments and created vaccines so we didn't cause plagues. It is why we took so long." "So you must be old then?" Glimpo asked, looking up at the human with awe. There were only stories and fairy tales of races living as long as the human was saying. Oh boy, I do feel old. I turned 30 only last month. 30? Glimpo tilted his head, letting his ears flop in confusion. But you said you were amongst those who first found us? Oh, I'm sorry, I meant years. Years? Glimpo heard a ping from his data slate, revealing it meant roughly 12 blocks. Glimpo felt his heart rate quicken as he did the maths. So you are 361 blocks. The entire party of diplomats froze in shock, looking at the human of being older than many of the nations they called home. You mean this youngster is actually older than I am? The old member of the group asked, trembling. It was a common point amongst their race that with age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes the right to rule. Well, I mean, when you put it like that, I guess so. How old are you, Glimpo? You must be a few years old. I would be roughly 2 of your human years. 2? So the eldest of your number is? Roughly 7 by your year, the old member declared. Wow, no wonder your race kept changing the diplomats we were talking with. We kept thinking we were doing something wrong. I will need to have a word with our data team about this one, but to think your race ages at this rate, though it would explain your broadcasts. Broadcasts? Yes, the first thing we detected about your world was broadcasts. We thought it was a translation error, a malfunction, or even interference that made it run at a faster rate. But to think you live your lives faster than imaginable. Human, are you an old member of your race? Glimpo asked, hoping the human was just a very old member. Me? Oh no! I still have my grandparents. Grandma, though, is more machine than Nan these days, but she celebrated her 90th. Oh, over 1,000 blocks. So many generations with one being. Heh, the human began before pausing, feeling the awkward atmosphere descending. Guess we are your equivalent of elves, then. Elves? Glimpo repeated, hoping for a reprieve. Yeah, back on our world, we have a story about a race of beings called elves. They looked just like us, but had pointed ears and lived millennia. The data slates all pinged, and the delegates all paled. Seeing the word meant 1,000 iterations of a year. But you don't need to worry. They are all just fairy tales and stories. All due respect, human. A being living as long as you do to us would be from stories and myths for us. How confident are you they aren't out there? Well, bugger guess we will need to look into the possibility of space elves. Just hope they aren't the Warhammer kind. Story 2. Humans have magic? Glint was going about his duties for the day and had just reached the point when he was meant to take his scheduled break. Entering the mess hall of the ship, he looked around at the few other crew members who were seated about the room. In the corner was a crew member that caught his eye. He was a human. He had clearly finished his meal and seemed to be doing something with his tentacle clusters, the things the humans called hands. Wondering what he was doing, Glint glided over towards the human. Hello, fellow Gribtak. Seeing you during this rest period is a pleasure. May I ask what you are doing? Looking up at Glint, the human arched a brow. Glint knew this to be a sign of heightened attention for the race. However, the reason behind the attention was unknown to him. Oh, hey Glint. Not sure what a Gribtak is, but I was just practicing something, he replied, holding up a coin in his left hand for Glint to see. A coin? Yeah, you know what? This is perfect. Always best to try with an audience. An audience, Glint parroted, becoming increasingly confused. Okay, watch the coin carefully, the human said as he held it between his left thumb and forefinger. A nice normal coin, right? Glint looked at the coin and nodded, a gesture he had learned in his interspecies communication lessons. Yes, that seems rather normal. Now watch this. Cupping his right hand around the coin, the human clearly took the coin from his pinched fingers. Following where the coin was curious about where this was going, Glint continued to watch, only for the human to shake his hand and then open his hand. Looking up to where the coin should have flown, Glint was shocked that nothing flew out of the hand. Where did the coin go? How did you do that? What is this? The human grinned at the rapid-fire questions before looking up. Following the human's gaze, Glint could see his eyes darting around as if searching for something. With a flash of movement that startled Glint, the human thrust out his right hand and made a fist. "There it is," the human said with a smile as he opened his hand to reveal the coin. How? Cool, right? Always liked doing little magic tricks since I was a kid, the human explained as he wove his fingers together and flapped his hands in a gesture from Glint's race to indicate a simple matter. Magic? Wait. Do humans have magic? I was under the impression magic was merely a fantasy. Huh? The human tilted his head in confusion. It is. This is just a simple trick. It's for amusement. No actual magic is required. We just call it a magic trick because it seems like it is magical. I refuse to believe that. You had the coin and made it vanish, Glint pointed out. That was just sleight of hand, the human explained, wiggling his tentacle clusters. We humans can be dexterous, so to amuse ourselves, we develop things to do with our hands and fingers. I still refuse to believe this is not actual magic. Explain how the trick is done, then. Glint, it's a roulette magician, never reveals his secrets. Are there other displays of this magic, then? Oh, a lot of tricks. More than just coins and cards. The most famous one is probably cutting a woman in half. Glint's face immediately flushed with warning colors. I knew your race was bloodthirsty, but to cut a woman in half for amusement is beyond anything civilized. Glint! The human let out a long exhale. Glint knew this meant the human was exasperated. It is a trick. The way it works is a woman is put in a box. The magician uses something to cut her in half and moves the two halves of the boxes apart. There is no blood or guts. A clean act of murder is still murder. Glint, the act ends when the magician pushes the boxes back together, and the woman is unharmed. Truly, by the Krelthor, I feel I must study this further. Glint? The human paused before tapping a few buttons on his data pad. I just sent you a book. It'll need some translation, obviously, but the images can help you understand. It is how to do simple tricks. You would share such treasured secret knowledge with me? An outsider? Glint, the never reveal secrets is just a performance thing. It keeps the wonder alive. Part of the fun of a magic trick is someone trying to work out how it is done. I see. I must admit I am overly intrigued myself. 'Tis a fun hobby. The human paused to look at his watch. Oh, that's my breakup. Have a good lunch, Glint. Glint sat down at a table, and now he had a tray with some food on it. However, he was more focused on the spoon in his gripper. The most straightforward trick in the holy text the human had given him showed how to easily bend a spoon. Story 3. Humanity's Commonplace Arms Bazaars. It had been several months since the war began, and Gordo was becoming increasingly concerned with its progress. What was meant to be a short battle over before Croxus had become a bogged-down and protracted conflict. The dimensional trenches had spread across multiple systems already and were only going to continue growing in length and depth. It was these very trenches that had forced a stalemate. What was meant to be a display of their greatest weapons was now nothing more than a meat grinder. "Hey!" one of Gordo's fellow officers called out hushedly. The man was a relatively slim and almost wiry creature from a world named Hungast 9. "What is it, Vax?" Gordo asked, gliding over using the grab nullifiers that enabled his larger frame species to move freely. "I have received word from the High General." This was never good. The High General, as the man had touted himself, had been pushing for increasingly extreme measures to end the war. "What did His Highness's order?" Gordo asked, letting the sarcastic use of the title ooze more than a doffleback during mating season. "Chemical weapons have been approved." Vax's words made all the glibness drain from Gordo's face. "Truly? Yes, we are being sent to subsector S3.1 to obtain the weapons required." "But that world is a primitive planet with barely sapient animals?" Vax nodded in understanding. The planet had long ago been used as an outpost to develop chemical weapons, but was long since abandoned. In the intervening years, a species had begun to develop. It was still incredibly primitive. So we will be harvesting the remnants of the research on this world without the inhabitants knowing, I take it? Gordo had done a few teaser retrievals, teasing being when member states visited primitive worlds for one reason or another and left the resident species with only weird and unreliable stories. No, not this time. The probes can remain where they are, and we won't need to use Glorfian disguises either. Gordo arched a brow at that statement. Glorfians were widely recognized as the most insufferable race in the galaxy, so it was common practice when teasing to use holographic projectors to make oneself look like the gray-skinned, large-eyed aliens. However, Gordo sometimes wondered if the reputation was simply due to everyone doing annoying stuff disguised as the gray aliens. Then how are we to retrieve the chemical weapons? Vax grinned at this question. We will disguise ourselves using the holographic field as members of the species and purchase them. Purchase? Yes, it seems the primitives don't know the danger of what they sell. I see. I pray we do not get exposed to the weapons while we do. It took no more than an hour of standard galactic time to arrive around the blue-colored planet. They could see the relevant tourist spots for teasers already marked out. Rather a lot of farmlands marked? Vax commented. Yes, though there is 1-0 out of 10 score for that desert region. Apparently they crashed into a weather balloon over a small town. So where should we land? Vax asked. Near one of these arms bazaars we were told to acquire the weapons from. Punching in the requested data into the AI, the pair watched as it plotted its course towards the nearest weapons depot where they could buy the weapons they needed. Landing in a gray concrete-covered area, the ship immediately engaged a cloaking system, making it imperceptible to the primitive natives. Donning their disguises, they readied all the required materials for the purchase, a container holding the local area's currency and false IDs should they be required. So this is where they store the most dangerous materials in the sector? Vax muttered with a nervous gulp. Now, Vax, remember the humans will see us as members of their own species. We will from now on be named Human as is tradition amongst the species. Understood. Vax nodded as his disguise finished taking shape, leaving him looking like a skinny human with pale skin and glasses. Now my turn, Gordo muttered, activating his own device and altering his appearance to a calorie-efficient human with what Gordo considered an ironic chess piece. Star Wars? How amusing that the AI created such a piece of clothing. Stepping forward, they entered the building, prepared for anything. Hi, welcome to Walmart, a human said the moment they entered. Where are the weapons? Vax demanded. Oh, hunting supplies, aisle 7, the human cheerily answered, pointing the way. Following the directions given, the pair were confused. There were just displays of primitive projectile weaponry. None of the chemical weapons the II had told them were sold here. Excuse me, Gordo called out to a human in the store's uniform. I am looking for... Gordo paused, looking around furtively. Capsaicin. Kappa what? The human replied, confused. Gord, ahem, Hugh, he doesn't know what you mean. Vax hastily interceded. It is the thing that burns stuff. Fire? Not that, no, Vax answered, letting out an exasperated sigh. Hey, Mike, you know what capsaicin is? Calling for help from a passing human, the pair grunted in frustration, only for the new human named Mike to reply. Oh, that's just stuff like pepper. That's aisle 2. Come on, guys, I'll show you the way. Feeling suddenly relieved, the pair followed the human Mike only to feel their blood begin to run cold. Well, colder than it already was. Before them was shelf upon shelf of containers that their AI was saying were beyond weapons-grade chemical weapons. And this is all for sale? Vax asked, struggling to believe such weapons were free to access. Well, yeah, we are a store after all, fellas. Oh, I see you one of those extreme heat sorts, ain't you? Extreme heat? Gordo repeated, confused. Listen, fellas, we have the normal spices. If you want extreme stuff, you need to go to the people who grow them. Otherwise, you won't feel the burn. We would not want to feel the burn anyways, Gordo protested. Don't be scaredy cats. The other week, my bro took a bite of a Carolina Reaper. A Carolina Reaper? Vax echoed. Yeah, a bunch of farmers went out of their way to make it as strong as possible. Like, you see this? The human Mike asked, holding up a small tube with powder. The one he ate was like 20,000 times hotter than this stuff. I'm sorry, did you say 8? Did he die? Vax asked, shocked to hear a species had eaten a chemical weapon. However, his shock was tempered by the fact it was a primitive, ignorant world. Heh, well, he wished he would die at the time, but we all laughed about it afterwards. Aye, explain! Gordo shouted at his watch, only for the data provided to make every cell in his body scream to leave the world as soon as possible. Thank you, human Mike. We will handle it from here on out. Hugh, what is the matter? Vax asked. We have to leave as soon as possible, Vax. Look at what the AI uncovered. Following the suggestion, Vax looked at the data and felt fear overcome his entire soul. The world had indeed been a lab for natural chemical weapons, weapons humans had taken to eating. Not only did they eat them, but they enjoyed them to such a degree that they selectively bred the weapons to make them monumentally more toxic. This whole world is a biohazard, Gordo. I know, just grab what we can and leave. The pair, with the delicate care of a man moving bottles of nitroglycerin, moved bottle after bottle of cooking spices into the cart before hastily leaving the shop after handing a briefcase over to the clerk at the checkout. Wait, sirs, you left a ton of money? The clerk called out after them. Ignoring the calls for them to come back, the pair hastily rushed to where their ship was parked, only to see 3 cars with smashed fronts where they had crashed into the unseen vehicle. I'm starting evacuation protocols now. Without another word, the pair climbed into the ship and flew away. Hey, Mike, you were talking to those 2 guys? The checkout clerk asked. Yeah, why? They bought like $100 of spices and paid with this, she explained, opening a case showing what would be close to $1 million. Well, my best guess is they are really high. Now, do we call the cops or split the cash?